Three visually impaired mice. Three visually impaired mice. See how they run. See how they run. They all went after Cruel's Monterey Jack. He cut off their tails with a battle axe. Now you know the horrible facts of three visually impaired mice. Chapter 17. Creeping down the long, dark passageway and arriving at the door to the dungeon, they soon realized that it, too, was locked and would require the talents of Earl and Jean. The mouse and the stick quickly went to work on the last lock, which was not the final obstacle that stood between the captives and the outside world. Once they'd gotten beyond the confines of the dungeon, there were still guards posted throughout the castle, for a man with as many enemies as Cruel can never have too much security. As it turned out, Jean soon proved quite useful for something other than picking locks. His slightly curved shape made him the perfect tool for peering around corners. "Well?" asked Elspeth as she pulled him back in. "It's clear," said Jean. The group, based on Georgie's knowledge of the castle layout, made a left turn and crept quietly along the corridor until they came to the entryway of a large room. Again, Elspeth carefully extended Jean so he might have a look, both left and right. When she retrieved him once more, Jean whispered so quietly that Elspeth had to bring him very close to her ear. "2 guards," he said, "one on either side." "What now?" Elspeth whispered to Georgie. "It's Thursday," he replied. "That means Weldon and Morgenstern are on duty at this post." "And how does that bit of knowledge help us now?" asked Elspeth. "Not sure," Georgie whispered, "but I do know that the two can't stand each other. They've been feuding since grade school." Elspeth, who knew a fair bit about grade school feuds, thought a moment about how such a thing might be exploited to their benefit. An idea popped into her head surprisingly quickly, and she whispered it to Jean, who considered it briefly. "I suppose it'd be all right," he whispered back, "as long as I'm only the cause of the violence and not involved in it directly." Earl and his crew also figured into Elspeth's plan, and she knelt down and whispered instructions like an NFL quarterback calling a play. "I like it," Earl replied with a devilish nod. Elspeth rose up and inched her face forward until she could see the 2 guards, both staring straight ahead, their backs to the wall. Their rigidness and silence may have been due to protocol or to a shared hatred, strong enough that they would neither talk nor even look at one another. Elspeth slowly moved Jean toward the guard at the left of the doorway, the one known as Morgenstern. With the stick, she smacked him sharply on the ear. "Hey!" he cried, as Elspeth ducked quickly back into the hallway. The guard turned to the fellow known as Weldon. "What do you think you're doing?" "What are you on about?" said Weldon. "Don't play dumb," snapped Morgenstern. "You flicked my ear and you know it." "I did no such thing," Weldon argued. "Do it again and it'll be the last time," threatened Morgenstern. The argument ended, not abruptly, but slowly, tapering off and dissolving into mumbles. Once the guards had gone back to their silence and straight ahead staring, Elspeth peeped around to the right, and this time smacked Weldon in the ear. "All right," said Weldon, "that's it." He dropped his spear, wound up, and threw the punch he'd been wanting to throw at Morgenstern's smug face for 20 years. Morgenstern, however, ruined it all by moving that smug face quickly out of the way, which caused Weldon's fist to have an unpleasant meeting with the rock wall immediately behind it. As Weldon screamed in agony, Morgenstern seized upon the opportunity and rushed Weldon, tackling him to the ground. As they wrestled, rolled, and grunted on the floor, Earl Grey and his team of verminous heroes skittered out and surreptitiously took to the task of tying the men's shoelaces together. A dangerous job, considering those big heavy shoes were in constant motion. The shoelace tying turned out not to have been necessary, as Elspeth, Jack and Jill, Georgie, Jean, and Earl Grey and his friends were able to glide through the room unnoticed due to the fact that the fight between the guards had escalated to the point of eye gouging. Down another long, torchlit hall, the escapees crept, but they froze when they heard footsteps and voices growing louder by the second. "Quick," Georgie whispered, "in here." He pulled open a door, and Elspeth immediately recognized the kitchen, now quiet and dark, though the wonderful smells of the previous night feast still lingered. Jack and Jill, who had been subsisting on prison scraps for several days now, breathed in the smells so deeply their ribs hurt. "Is that every-berry pie I smell?" whispered Jack. "Not exactly," said Elspeth. This garnered a sharp look from Georgie, and Elspeth replied with an innocent-looking shrug. Following Georgie, the others slipped inside and closed the door. Georgie grasped the knob tightly as the voices and footsteps neared. Then the footsteps stopped, though the voices continued. Elspeth recognized them as belonging to Catherine and Jane. "I know," said Catherine. "She may be a horrible little beast, but did they have to chop off her head?" Such a shame, said Jane. It'll ruin that dress. As for Georgie, I say good riddance, said Catherine. No kidding, Jane agreed. Did you know he tried to kiss me once? Ew, disgusting, said Catherine. As she spoke, Georgie's face reddened and his teeth clenched as tightly as his grip on the doorknob. Catherine reached for the knob and found it immovable. She said. Must be locked. We'll have to go around. When the women continued down the hall, Georgie felt it necessary to whisper, It's not true. He then turned and led the group through the kitchen. Put that down, Earl Grey scolded Barry White, knocking a sizable breadcrumb from the mouse's mouth. But it's pumpernickel, said Barry. He took one last sniff of the morsel, then hurried to catch up with the others. The door at the other end of the kitchen led them back out into the courtyard, where the shops had long ago closed down for the night. On the catwalk above stood several more guards, but they were more concerned with attackers or assassins breaking in than with prisoners getting out, and their backs were to the escapees. Elsbeth and the others crouched down into the shadows and away from the glaring light of a half-moon as they crept across the plaza, stopping at another closed door. This is the billiards room, Georgie whispered. It's under renovation, and the other day I noticed an opening in the outer wall. So let's go then, said Jack. It's under guard, said Georgie. The only thing is, I can't remember whether it's Rutherford or Derbyshire on Thursdays. What does it matter? Asked Elsbeth. Why, it matters a great deal, said Georgie. If it's Derbyshire, we're in good shape. He has a tendency to fall asleep on the job. And if it's not, asked Jill, then it's Rutherford. 5-time winner of the Century of the Year award, said Georgie. To be honest, I'm not sure what to do at this point. This is really the only way out of the castle, other than over the wall or through the drawbridge. Elsbeth knelt down in front of the door and tried to slide Jean beneath so he could have a look around. But the space between the door and the ground proved to be too tight, even for a pointy, scrawny fellow like Jean. It's no use, she said. He won't fit. We'll just have to chance it and hope that it's Derbyshire. What if it's the other guy? Asked Jack. Then we'll be added to Cruel's collection of severed heads, I would imagine, said Elsbeth. That would never happen, said Jack with a gap-toothed smile. He'll never get the best of my daughter. Georgie placed his hand upon the doorknob. Are you sure about this? Do it, ordered Elsbeth with a quick nod. Georgie inhaled deeply and began turning the knob so slowly that its movement was barely perceptible to the naked eye. When he turned it as far as it would go, he looked at Elsbeth once more. She nodded, and he pushed the door inward. Immediately, Elsbeth gasped at what she saw. Across the room sat a man with round red cheeks and a double chin, and he was staring right back at them. The man, as it turned out, was Derbyshire, who apparently had a habit of sleeping with his eyes half open. In fact, it would have been difficult to discern that he was sleeping at all, if not for the subtle but consistent snoring. He was sitting on a stack of boards, leaning back against the wall, a mere couple of feet from the opening. For a moment, Elsbeth was concerned that the sound of her heart beating against her sternum might be sufficient to wake the man, and she took several slow, deep breaths to try to calm herself. The room was cluttered with a number of obstacles, present as a result of the renovation project. There were tools, piles of boards, and loose stones. The escapees started across, the mice leading the way. Jack's bad foot momentarily failed him, and he stumbled over a mortarboard. Instantly, everyone froze, and all eyes shot toward Derbyshire. The jowly guard mumbled and stirred, but his own eyes remained at half-mast, and he settled back into a deep sleep. Jill glared intensely at her husband, and Jack shrugged apologetically. They continued toward the escape route without further incident, and when they slipped through the hole in the wall, they found themselves standing beneath scaffolding being used as part of the renovation project. It served as the perfect cover from the eyes of the guards on the catwalk above. Just being outside the castle walls, Elsbeth had a new and overwhelming appreciation for freedom. Breathing in deeply, she wanted nothing more than to run across the field and away from the castle. But Georgie put his fingers to his lips, then pointed upward, reminding her and the others of the posted sentries. From the beginning, this had been an impromptu rescue plan, and as a result, had not been carefully thought out. After all, who could have imagined that escaping from the dungeon and sneaking out of the castle would be the easy part? How were they to get across the open field to the cover of the trees some 200 yards away without being spotted? Okay, whispered Elsbeth to Georgie. What do you recommend? I'm sorry, Georgie replied. I honestly don't know. We could dig a tunnel from here to the forest, offered James Brown. Yes, said Elsbeth, and in the 3 weeks it would take you to dig that tunnel, we will all have lost enough weight to fit through it. As it turned out, with all great minds hard at work, none of them had a better idea. There seemed to be no viable solution. Then out of the blackness came the kind of shriek that curls toes and stiffens hair on the backs of necks. With a second shriek and a whoosh, a shadow shot across the moon. Elsbeth was certain she knew the cause of it. "It's Fergus," she said, searching the darkened sky. There came another shriek and a fourth, but these were of human origin as the guards on the catwalk above fought off the dive-bombing owl, ducking for cover and stabbing their spears blindly into the night. "Now," said Georgie, and with the others close behind, he left the cover of the scaffolding and sprinted for the trees. Elsbeth was not a terribly athletic child. Of all the subjects in school, she disliked gym most of all. As a result, she was in very poor shape, and only halfway across the open field, she developed a searing cramp in the side of her gut. She struggled on for as long as she could, but soon the pain became too much, and she stopped and doubled over, feeling that she might vomit. Behind her, the guards were still locked in battle with Fergus, who continued his daring assault, clawing and shrieking while deftly avoiding the deadly spear tips thrust in his direction. It was a brave and noble effort, but Elsbeth wondered just how long he could keep it up. She stumbled onward until she found herself being scooped off the ground. Jack threw the girl over his shoulder, and with Jill at his side, he limped and lumbered the remaining distance to the grove of trees. Out of the moonlight and into the dreamy shadows they stumbled, falling into a heap upon the soft grass. For the first few moments, they just lay there, catching their breath. Before any of them could say a word, another shriek shot across the night. This was not a war cry, but a squeal of intense agony, followed by a thick and sudden silence. "Fergus," whispered Elsbeth. A wise old owl lived in an oak, kept to himself unless you spoke. With syntax off or grammar wrong, say what you will, 'cause now he's gone.